Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight for the McConnell Center series, Why You Should Read. My name is Kathleen Price, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Susan Laehn. Dr. Laehn is a 2005 University of Louisville graduate and McConnell Scholars Program alumnus. Following graduation, she went on to receive her MA and PhD from Louisiana State University. Throughout the years, she became an assistant professor of politics at the University of Leeds and held multiple teaching positions at University College of London, both located in the United Kingdom. Currently, Dr. Laehn teaches political science at Iowa State University, as well as maintains her non-resident fellowship at the McConnell Center. Some of her recent works include co-editing Welcoming the Other, Student, Stranger, and Divine, as well as co-editing a new edition of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations with our very own Dr. Gary Gregg. Tonight, she joins us to discuss why we should read the Greek playwright Aeschylus. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Susan Laehn.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thanks to the McConnell Center. It's always a pleasure to be here. As Kathleen said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit this evening about why you should read Aeschylus, particularly his trilogy, the Oresteia. It was written in about 458 BC by Aeschylus, and it is a trilogy of plays that includes Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and the Eumenides. These plays were written to be performed at the Festival of Dionysus. The festival was sort of a combination of partying, right, and religious ceremony, which took place over the course of several days. Typically, a few tragedians would compete in this festival for honors with their plays, and Aeschylus won first place with the Oresteia. We often talk about Aeschylus as the sort of father of tragedy. He lays the foundation for later plays by Sophocles and Euripides. These are the three tragedians whose works survive intact. Aeschylus was considered sort of cutting edge at his time because he actually presented his trilogies with a unified theme. These weren't just three disparate plays. And he also added a second actor, which was quite revolutionary. So let's examine these three plays that make up the Oresteia. I think in order to do that successfully for the listeners and for those who are watching online, we probably need a bit of background first, so spoiler alert if you haven't read these yet. The Oresteia, or the themes that arise in the Oresteia, actually begin several generations before. I will try to keep this simple so that you don't have too many names to keep track of. One of the main characters and the namesake of the first play is Agamemnon. Agamemnon is the brother of Menelaus. Some of you may know who Menelaus is. Menelaus is the husband of Helen, who is either abducted or willingly goes with Paris to Troy and ignites the Trojan War. So Agamemnon's father is Atreus. Atreus's father is Pelops, and Pelops's father is Tantalus. Tantalus, so I guess this is Agamemnon's great-grandfather, serves his own son, Pelops, to the gods at a dinner party to test their omniscience. And this foreshadows something that Atreus will later do and sort of ignites this continual sort of bloodlust among this family. So Pelops is brought back to life. This is how he has a son, Atreus. And Atreus later is betrayed by his wife, Areope, with his cousin, I believe, Thyestes. Atreus is angered by the adultery that his wife and Thyestes have committed, and in this sort of similar vein of madness that seemed to have taken hold of his grandfather Tantalus, he murders the two sons that Areope bore from this affair and serves them to Thyestes at a banquet. This is all quite grotesque. And then we arrive at the characters in the Oresteia. So Agamemnon and Menelaus are the two sons of Atreus and Areope, and thus they are heirs to all of these terrible deeds that their ancestors have performed. Agamemnon would become king of Mycenae, and Menelaus, obviously, as I said, is the famous husband of Helen. Agamemnon is married to a woman named Clytemnestra. quite a mouthful. And he vows to Agamemnon assist his brother in conquering Troy and bringing Helen home. But prior to sailing off to war against Troy, Agamemnon has angered the goddess Artemis. He has killed a sacred deer in a sacred grove, and he says that he is a better hunter than Artemis is. And so when the time comes to sail for Troy, Artemis calms the winds. Okay? So Agamemnon's fleet can't sail. Now, a prophet tells him that if he wants to appease Artemis, he's going to have to sacrifice the most precious thing that had come into his possession in the year in which he killed this sacred deer. This happens to be his firstborn daughter, Iphigenia. So he sends word for her to come home. In some tellings of this story, this is on the pretense that she will marry Achilles. But she comes home. Clytemnestra is outraged. Clytemnestra tries to stop him from doing this, but is sent away, and Iphigenia sort of accepts her fate and allows herself to be sacrificed and killed. And after she is sacrificed, Agamemnon's fleet is able to get underway. So the action, this is all background. The action in the first play, Agamemnon picks up as Clytemnestra is waiting for word of Agamemnon's return. So she has taken a lover in his absence. The lover is Aeschylus. And I can't really do the plays justice, I think, in this short summary. I encourage you to read them. The quality of the poetry is so beautiful, and it needs to be read and mulled over and appreciated. But she waits for Agamemnon to return, and when he does, he brings home a mistress, Cassandra, who is the daughter of King Priam of Troy. Clytemnestra, when he returns, lays down these sort of maroon purple tapestries for him to walk on to enter their palace. And these tapestries, at least in the interpretation of some scholars, may mimic the bridal tapestries that would have been worn and taken to the marriage bed. This clearly has symbolism, since Agamemnon has to walk on them, trample on these bridal tapestries in order to enter the palace. It may be that he recognizes the gods would frown upon him for walking upon cloth. This shows his hubris. But nevertheless, he walks on them. They're sort of maroon in color, which alludes to the bloodshed, both that has been spilled in the past, but also the bloodshed that is to come. Clytemnestra sort of tangles Agamemnon in these royal robes, stabs him to death in the bath, and seeks revenge for the sacrifice of their daughter Iphigenia at the beginning of the Trojan War. Aeschylus, who is Clytemnestra's lover and Agamemnon's rival, takes credit for the death, and the chorus, which is a primary feature of Greek tragedies, symbolizes the people, and they are sort of praying for Agamemnon's son Orestes to come and avenge his father. And this is the close of the first play in the trilogy. The second play is Libation Bearers. Some time has passed since Agamemnon's murder, and Clytemnestra and Aeschylus rule in his absence, or I guess after his death. Orestes returns, and he meets his sister Electra in a graveyard in this play. They're paying respect to their father's memory, and he tells Electra that the god Apollo has come to him and charged him with avenging the murder of his father by slaying the murderers. This obviously is Aeschylus, but also his mother, Clytemnestra. He does it. But this arouses some old deities who guard over the family, who guard over blood relations, who guard over home and hearth. And for them, slaying one's own mother, the one who has actually given birth to him, is among the gravest of sins. These old deities are called the Erinyes. We would know them as the Furies. They take center stage in the Eumenides, which is the final of the three plays. So the Furies are enraged. They chase Orestes for quite some time. He's aided by Apollo. Apollo is the god who demands Orestes avenge for his father, demands that Orestes avenge his father. Orestes flees. Apollo goes with him to the holiest place in Greece, Delphi, And in the temple of the oracle, Apollo puts the Furies to sleep so that Orestes can flee to Athens. And he goes to Athens and he enters the temple of Athena. And he asks for forgiveness and he asks for her protection. Clytemnestra's ghost is roused and sort of spurs the Furies on to follow him to Athens. Athena arrives and she conducts a trial of Orestes. The Furies sort of act as the prosecution, right? They're condemning him. Apollo is sort of Orestes' chief witness, kind of defends him, is an advocate for him. And we have 12 men of Athens that act as a jury. This should start to sound familiar to things that we are experienced with in our day. So the jury returns a tied verdict. It's even number. And Athena casts the tie-breaking vote. And she casts it in favor of Orestes. She uses this trial as a basis for establishing the Athenian justice system. She establishes the spot on which the trial is held as the Areopagus and says that this is going to be the legal center of Athens going forward. She bans the Furies to live below the earth under the Areopagus, but appeases them by saying that they can remain protective spirits of home and hearth, but they have no role in this legal justice system. They're not destroyed, but they're given their proper place, hidden beneath this rock of justice. So what is so significant about this play? Why is it relevant for us 2,500 years after it was written? So I want to expand on 4 themes in what I think is sort of the ascending order of importance. So, at least in my mind. So first, some things are sacred. Some things are sacred and cannot be violated without divine wrath or without punishment in law. The bonds of family are sacred. These can't be taken lightly. The bond that many of these familial bonds we see broken throughout the play and through the history that Aeschylus' audience would have been intimately familiar with ahead of seeing this play. So the bond between father and daughter, between Agamemnon and Iphigenia, which Agamemnon destroys in a bit of a grotesque way, destroying innocence, destroying beauty. The bond between husband and wife, which is also violated when Agamemnon takes his daughter's life. You obviously entrust your spouse with your children, and does so against Clytemnestra's protest, but also in choosing to elevate the marital bond of his brother Menelaus and Helen above his own nuclear family. He's somehow sort of violating that sacred trust that Clytemnestra would have had in him. He essentially sacrifices Iphigenia in order to go avenge his brother's honor. And we're left to ask whether this is a just trade-off. Agamemnon takes Cassandra as a concubine, right, which clearly would violate a marital vow as we would understand it today, but Clytemnestra has also violated these vows. It may be that she assumes Agamemnon is already dead, having been away for something like 10 years, but it's more likely that she no longer feels an attachment to the person who sacrificed her firstborn child. And finally, the bond that rouses the Furies, that of mother and son, is violated by Orestes. Apollo commands it, but the Furies are present to remind Orestes that blood relations are sacred. There are older allegiances that have to be respected regardless of what these new gods like Apollo command. And Orestes violates that bond by killing the woman who gave him life. And this brings me to the next point, that the Furies also represent this internal strife that's caused by violating things which ought to be inviolable. We can see the role of conscience here, perhaps. The entire house of Atreus seems to commit atrocities with impunity. The only repayment ever seems to be the shedding of someone else's blood in revenge. But Orestes, who perhaps has a more developed conscience, is hounded by these Furies. He's overcome maybe with guilt. He undertook the act at Apollo's command, but he can't escape the Furies. They constantly remind him of it. And I would argue that this is important in our day and age, and not everyone would agree with me probably, but maybe it signifies the importance of guilt. In a modern society, in my mind, we have tried to free ourselves from the pangs of guilt by creating a moral system in which everything is permitted. But Aeschylus teaches us that at least some acts are so vile that they demand our suffering and they warrant a guilty conscience. And the proper next point that I would want to make is that the proper political order requires balance. It has to be led with reason and with wisdom. For those of you who have read Plato's Republic, I know several of you in this room already have, this should sound familiar. The Furies play a role here, but Athena does too. So she is the goddess of wisdom. And in Eumenides, the Furies rise up from the earth. They are these old goddesses, older than Apollo, older than Athena, and they represent tribalism. They represent the family. And they are, of course, outraged that Orestes has killed his own mother, perhaps, maybe, as I said, the greatest violation of all of these in this familial way. And so they chase Orestes to Delphi and on to Athens. And there, Athena agrees to hear the case of Orestes and remands his fate to the decision of 12 jurors. She ultimately casts the deciding vote, but this is a process. This is a procedure in law. And the Furies are outraged. They can't believe the audacity of this new goddess to overturn what they see as a more fundamental moral code, something deeper, something that predates this new legal system. And the symbolism here is that wisdom has to triumph over the passions, that reason has to triumph over the passions. Wisdom in the form of Athena, the passions in the form of the Furies. And this mimics what Plato tells us through philosophy, though Aeschylus does it in poetry and does it a bit earlier than Plato. And as Plato knew, in order to establish justice, wisdom has to be at the fore. You don't banish the passions entirely, they just have to be kept in their proper place. And this leads me to the last point. This is a story of the birth of civilization over tribalism, the birth of this legal punishment that supersedes and suppresses the need for revenge and retribution. We have that need, but we carry it out through a system of justice rather than through revenge and bloodlust. Athena, when she frees Orestes, establishes this new paradigm. It's no longer the case that justice gets determined by seeking revenge for wrongs done. This is what Aeschylus says in Book 1 of the Republic, giving back what is owed. He's the old man in the Republic. And this is an older understanding of justice. It's a more primitive understanding of justice that Aeschylus is rejecting, that Plato also rejects. Instead, justice has to be determined by reason, by rationality. And Athena installs this new form by hearing both sides, by allowing the jury to deliberate, and ultimately siding with Orestes. Now, perhaps she does this less to affirm Orestes' choice. You can never really condone killing one's mother, but maybe she does it more to wipe the slate clean. These horrors of the house of Atreus, going all the way back to Tantalus, will not continue. No one, not even the primitive Furies, will be able to exact revenge for Clytemnestra's murder. But as I said, she doesn't destroy the Furies. She doesn't entirely banish them. She gives them a place in this social order of Athens. She says that the spot on which the trial has taken place is forevermore going to be the place for the law courts of Athens, this rocky outcropping beneath the Acropolis named the Areopagus. Okay? And under this rocky outcropping, under this place of law, she makes a place for the Furies. They're sort of mythically buried inside the earth there, beneath the place of law. And they still have a role in the home. They still have a role in individual conscience, but their passion has to be subdued. It can't be the source of justice. Only law can serve that purpose. So if you ever get a chance to travel to Athens and you go stand on the Areopagus, you will literally be standing on the rock that, according to legend, covers the tomb of the Furies. And so Aeschylus outlines for us how Athena has moved morality away from tribalism, away from blood feuds, away from retribution and revenge, and instead morality is going to be guarded by reason and whose product is law. And through this institution, we see the dawn of this new civilizational system of justice that supersedes the tribalism that came before it. And I think finally, this is less a point about the importance of this particular play, but maybe a point about the importance of the Greek tragedies more generally, or the power of literature more generally, of poetry. And it strikes me that when Plato bans the poets from his Republic, it's not so much because they tell lies and are too far removed from the truth, as he says, but rather because they're too close to the truth. That they have a way of telling us a story that moves us, and maybe people do perform heinous acts. And education is clearly important for Plato. And if the education of young readers matters as much to Plato as he says it does, then we have to keep a close guard over those stories. Plato knew that Aeschylus is illustrating something true, but he's also trying to defend philosophy. And he knew that Aeschylus had arrived perhaps at the same place that he did, or he was going to, but by a different road. Perhaps this threatens the Platonic project, and so needed to be controlled, needed to be put under the guise of philosophy. So I would say read the Oresteia, see where Plato might have taken some inspiration. Read the Oresteia, see for yourself that literature as well as philosophy can show us truths that transcend the generations. So, thank you.